Hello, I'm Fernanda.
Hi, I'm Leticia.
We are your hosts, and you are at the Bilingual Coffee Podcast, the show that brings you all about raising bilingual children from the standpoint of two bilingual moms and language teachers.
Toda semana nós vamos compartilhar um pouquinho da nossa experiência com a criação bilíngue e também abordar assuntos relacionados ao mundo do bilinguismo.
Nossos episódios serão bilíngues, um pouco em inglês e um pouco em português, por isso o nome Bilingual Coffee.
Join us! Grab your cup of coffee and get ready for today's show! No episódio de hoje, vamos falar um pouco sobre como tem sido a relação das nossas crianças com as línguas nesses 2 últimos anos.
Bom dia, tudo certo, Leti?
Hello, Fê! Tudo tranquilo? E aí? Parou de chover?
Parou de chover, ainda bem, uns dias de sol agora, chega de chuva.
Isso aí, muito bem. Então, o que você tem para conversar com nós hoje, Fê?
Eu quero começar contando a minha experiência, porque no finalzinho do episódio passado, tu contou uma história muito legal do B, when he went to class with you, and then you were working with your students, and they were all talking about the weekend, and in the end of the class, I thought it was just awesome that B was just looking at you like, okay, what about me, mom?
Yeah.
If I am a student too, I wanna share my story, I wanna share my weekend.
Yeah, and I know that Arthur is a little bit shyer than B, right? So he is not the kind of person who is gonna start talking like, my turn, hey.
No, that's right. Arthur is a little bit shy. So at first he doesn't really talk to people. He feels that he has to get to know the person more. Yeah, so after a few minutes, yes, then he starts interacting. But yeah, that's true. So I think B is much more spontaneous in this sense, which is great for languages too.
Yeah. At this part, yes, okay. Sometimes I get worried because he arrives in a place and then people can like take him wherever the person wants because he starts talking and then like, wow, a little too much, but okay. In the language sense, it's good.
That's true. So what I wanted to share with you all, is now in the end of August and the beginning of September, we traveled and we went to Argentina. We went to Ushuaia, literally the end of the world. Yeah. And when we actually decided to go to Argentina, it was kind of like, well, it's a Spanish-speaking country. I wish we could go to an English-speaking country so Arthur would have the chance to, I don't know, practice or use English or listen to English if he wouldn't speak. So it was kind of, I'm not sure it's the best place, but okay, it's a place that we wanted to go, so we just decided to go. And the things surprises us, the things that happen sometimes when we are traveling, and you have no idea how many opportunities we had to use English. So that was something amazing.
Porque é uma cidade turística, né? Então, provavelmente, né, deveria ter passeios com inglês, porque pessoas do mundo inteiro vão visitar, então talvez por isso, né?
Exato. E antes da gente viajar, eu conversei com o Arthur e eu expliquei que nós íamos então para a Argentina, que era um outro país, que eles falavam espanhol, que espanhol era uma outra língua. Então nós fomos nesse contexto, assim, preparados para o espanhol. Mas aí nós ouvíamos inglês no hotel, nós ouvíamos inglês nos restaurantes, em qualquer passeio turístico que a gente fazia, os guias falavam em inglês, justamente por essa questão que tu coloca. Por ser uma cidade turística, a gente acaba tendo contato com pessoas de vários lugares do mundo. E foi muito legal, because like in our trip, Arthur and we tried to keep speaking English. So I tried to keep English because since we were traveling and we were just like, okay, there were so many languages in the end, yeah, but I was trying to speak English to him all the time. So people would listen to us interacting in English and they would approach us in English most of the time because they didn't think that we were, I don't know, Brazilians or something because of the language mainly.
And was John speaking English too with you or Portuguese?
Mainly Portuguese, but sometimes he would use some English, the way he keeps doing. Yes, he hasn't changed much in this way.
Okay.
So I think this was something like the first week, because we spent 2 weeks in this trip. So the first week, I realized that Arthur was listening to all these languages all the time, and to all these different people speaking English and speaking Spanish and sometimes speaking Portuguese. And sometimes he would ask me questions like, "Mom, why are you speaking Spanish?" And I was like, well, because I know how to speak some Spanish and I can use this language to communicate. And sometimes he was like, okay, but why is that person speaking English? Oh, because that person is a tour guide and there are people who can't speak Spanish. So the person is speaking English and things like that. So he was asking me questions a lot.
Trying to understand how the world works in terms of language. Like, what an amazing trip and an amazing experience to him.
That's true. So the first week, I would say that he was more like of an observer, just paying attention to everything around him. And then the second week was something that surprised me, because the second week we were in the hotel. And there was this guy who, when we arrived at the hotel restaurant for dinner, there was this guy, and we got into the restaurant speaking English, and he came and started speaking English to us. And then Arthur just looked at him, and he asked Arthur's name and how old he was. And then Arthur just replied in English. And I was like, whoa, that's something new. Because either like he wouldn't reply, or sometimes he would just reply in Portuguese, very, very quietly. And then the next day, and then during dinner there, the waiter would come and ask some questions. So again, we would speak some English, some Spanish, some Portuguese, because the waiter could speak the 3 languages. So that dinner time was like full of languages. Yes, depending on the topic, depending on the person, we were using all the languages. The following day, we went on a tour, and then we spent like the whole day in the tour. When we arrived back at the hotel, Arthur met this guy, Nico, his name. Arthur met Nico at the entrance, and Nico came and said, "Hey, my friend, how are you? How was your day today?" And Arthur started telling him about his day in English. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at that. My boy is speaking English to another person.
Yeah, let's make a parenthesis here.
Please
Yeah,
go
because
on.
guys, Faye and I have been talking like in private, and sometimes like we think, can our child, like our children, speak English to other people? Because we keep talking to them, like, but we keep imagining, are they able to speak, to communicate with other people? Because like, especially sometimes we speak English to them and then they reply in Portuguese. We keep thinking, can they speak English really? So when Faye told me that, like, yeah, she sent me a message and she said, Arthur can speak English to other people. And like, it's amazing because we know that they can speak English, but like, it's so good, like, to see that happens, like, wow, in real life, that our hearts like want to explode in happiness because it's amazing.
That's true. É como assim, é a recompensa, eu acho, de todo esse esforço, de todos esses anos, né, de todas essas tentativas. Então, todos esses desafios que às vezes a gente traz aqui, que a gente comenta, tive que mudar a estratégia, tentei fazer isso, tentei fazer aquilo, é justamente para manter, né, o inglês e ver essas coisas acontecerem. Então, de fato, assim, foi incrível ver que ele pode, que ele consegue se comunicar em inglês com outras pessoas, né? Não só comigo. E aí entrou a questão.
Pode falar.
Eu só ia comentar rapidinho, que daí entrou a questão do espanhol também. Que aí nessa segunda semana ele estava muito mais ligado nessa questão do espanhol, muito mais interessado. Então, assim, nós entrávamos, por exemplo, no táxi e a gente, né, dizia bom dia, E aí ele mesmo já dizia bom dia também, né? E aí na hora de dormir, ele mesmo dizia buenas noches, a gente entregava alguma coisa para ele dizia graças. Então ele ficou muito
Amazing.
mais ligado, e assim, e a gente acabou não ensinando, sabe, dizendo para ele, né, tipo: "Ah, tem que falar assim", né. Ele simplesmente nos ouvia, né, então assim, na loja, no restaurante, a gente dizia: "Oh, gracias, buen dia", né, hasta luego, esse tipo de coisa, e ele começou a usar essas pequenas palavras na última semana também, foi muito legal.
Ó, só fazendo um gancho, a Fê teve a oportunidade de levar, né, o Arthur para outro país, então ela pode ver em prática. Como eu ainda não levei o Bernardo viajar, eu usei uma mentirinha santa, vamos dizer assim. Eu tenho alguns amigos que falam inglês e um deles, a gente às vezes conversa por vídeo, né? Ele manda vídeos, ele começou a mandar vídeos em inglês pro B, falando inglês e tal, e o B começou a responder ele. E aí, um dia a gente tava falando ali, daí ele pediu, does Uncle Rafa speak Portuguese? And I said, no, Uncle Rafa, tio Rafa, a gente fala tio Rafa, não Uncle. Tio Rafa speaks only English. And he said, wow. And then, like, eu menti pra ele, né? Porque o Rafa é um amigo meu que mora no Brasil, mora em São Paulo, mas eu falei pra ele, porque como eu tava naquela coisa, eu falava inglês com ele, ele me respondia em português, eu falava inglês, ele me respondia em português, eu digo, vou falar que ele só fala inglês, vamos ver o que vai dar. E deu muito certo, porque ele acredita que o Rafa só fala inglês. Então, toda vez que o Rafa manda um vídeo pra ele em inglês, ele fala tudo somente em inglês, ele não mistura nada. Eu penso, caipora, por que comigo você mistura? Às vezes ele tá falando tudo em inglês, mas ele larga uma palavra em português no meio. Como que nessa situação ele fala tudo só em inglês, ele dá um jeito dele de falar tudo só em inglês. E tanto é que também teve uma outra vez que eu também comentei com a Fê, que ele mandou um videozinho para as filhas de um casal amigo meu que mora nos Estados Unidos, e aí ele tava falando, daí eu falei para ele, fala onde é que você vai, filho, tell me where you're going, because I spoke English, and then I said, tell them that you're gonna go to vovô João, and then he said, I'm gonna go to my grandpa João. Vovô João é uma coisa que a gente sempre mantém. Vovô, vovó, Dinda e Dinda, a gente sempre mantém em português. Mas ele traduziu, porque ele sabia que as meninas não falavam em português, então ele já automaticamente falou grandpa. Eu disse, como que pode, né? Quando eles sabem, que se falando até no outro episódio, eles sabem que a gente fala português. Então, para ele faz mais sentido falar aquela palavra em português ou aquela palavra em inglês. Mas quando eles percebem que não, aquela pessoa não entende, se eu falar vovô, ele não vai entender. Como que pode, o cérebro dele já automaticamente falou só inglês. Então, a Fê pode ver na prática que o Arthur fala somente inglês, porque estava na vivência, e eu fiz esse teste aí dessa mentirinha, que colou e tá colando até hoje, o tio Rafa só fala inglês, e aí ele não mistura. Então, é muito massa como isso acontece. No cérebro da criança é amazing.
It's amazing. E para ver justamente como eles conseguem diferenciar as línguas, né? Como eles conseguem saber com essa pessoa eu tenho que falar tal língua e com outra pessoa eu preciso falar a tal língua. E falando nisso, now I have a question. I was just thinking here, because we are talking about all these interactions and so on. And what about B and Bia? Because this is something that I think it's curious. How are they dealing? I mean, obviously, as you mentioned before, Bia doesn't speak yet because she's, 6 months old now? 5, 6 months old?
4.
4!
She's going to turn 4, 5 months old in the end of October.
The end of October, okay. So, so she's just a little baby, yes. And what about B? How does he interact with her? Can you tell us a little bit about this experience?
Yeah, because B, he was just speaking most of the time I was talking to him in English and then he would reply in Portuguese, English and in Portuguese. The only moments that were just in English were like when we sat to play in the bedroom. So like the way that we play, and then I don't know, some click happened and then he would speak only in English. And then in the reading time, like when we sit to read books, our books are only in English. And then I would read in English, and then he would talk about the story in English, and then it's okay. But apart from that, most of the time I would talk to him in English and he would reply in Portuguese. And then when Bia was born, finally something happened in his mind, and then he returned to speaking English with me also. I'm going to talk about Bia, but then I don't know if it's because like belonging that we talked in the first episode, like me and Bia were speaking only English because as the same way that I did with him, I do with her. I like to talk a lot, as everybody knows. So I go, I walk around the house and then I show. hey, Bia, this is your bedroom. Look, there are so many books. They're so colorful. These are the toys. And I keep talking and describing everything in the house. And then every time that I go to her, I say, hey, my little princess, blah, blah, blah. And then he started talking to her only in English. And I don't know why he started like coming, not on answering me. He started calling me and talking to me first in English. So I don't know if it's because he wants to belong. He doesn't want to be different because when she was born, like there was jealousy and so on. So he wanted attention, all those stuff of like being the old brother. And then I don't know, maybe because he wanted to be like Bia, he didn't want to be the different one. I don't know if it was because of this, but I assume it was because of this. So now he has been talking to me in English like most of the time. Sometimes he like puts a word in Portuguese in the middle of a sentence in English, but like finally he's speaking much more. I believe that's the period that he has been speaking English to me like most of the time since he was born. Like that's the best moment for us. And then he goes to Bia and he approaches her in English. And I realized that he does the same way that I do. He arrives, hey, my little sister, hey, my little princess. He starts like this. And then, how are you today? The same way, the same voice that I do, because when we speak to a baby, we speak like, com essa vozinha bobada, né? He does the same thing he does. And then there was one day that I posted also a video on YouTube. She was crying in the bedroom, and then because she was sat on her chair, and then she was crying alone, and then he went to the bedroom and he started singing, don't cry, brother is here. And then he was singing to her in English, like to calm her down, and it was so cute. So now he has been speaking like most of the time in English with her. I realized that when it's like Daddy, B and B, sometimes he speaks Portuguese to her. I believe it's because he has been listening to Daddy speaking Portuguese to Bia, so maybe he wants to interact like Daddy. But like the other times he speaks English. So I'm super happy. That's the best moment of our bilingualism at our house because of Bia. So maybe because like everybody's speaking, so he wants just to follow us, and it's been amazing.
And it's just amazing as to see how these experiences can actually change their behaviors a little bit. Yeah, I had something similar happening to Arthur after the trip. So after we arrived home, he is now much more open to English again. Yeah, probably because he realized that other people around the world speak English. So now he speaks much more English to me than he was doing, for example, in the beginning of the year or like the end of last year. So when we are together nowadays, or again, it's basically English. I don't mean that we don't use Portuguese, because again, it depends on the situation, it depends on the topic, yeah. But we can keep the language alive. And I think this is something really important. So since we arrived back from the trip, Arthur is speaking much more English, and I was so happy again because I said, yes, we can do it again.
E também você comentou comigo que ele tá mais interessado em outras línguas, né?
Sim, teve esses dias que ele... agora até ele já diminuiu um pouquinho, né? Mas logo que nós voltamos, ele falava muito dessas palavrinhas em espanhol, aquelas que eu comentei. Então, ele me pediu alguma coisa, eu dava alguma coisa para ele, ele me dizia gracias, né? Ou depois ele ia dar boa noite pro Daddy e ele dizia buenas noches, né? E até que um dia ele me perguntou, ele me pediu, ele disse assim, mãe, can you teach me Spanish? And I was like, oh my gosh. I said, yeah, well, maybe, yes. Ainda vamos ter que conversar sobre isso.
Eu também tenho uma experiência parecida com essa coisa das línguas, que a gente vai deixar para um próximo episódio também. Então, acompanhe o nosso terceiro episódio. Já acabou nosso cafezinho, já acabou, que a minha xícara tá vazia já. A tua não acabou ainda?
Acho que sim, vou precisar de mais um café.
Isso, a gente tem que abastecer nosso café. Mas eu vou compartilhar no próximo episódio. Você pode falar também um pouquinho mais dessa questão das línguas, assim, dele ter percebido que existem mais línguas no próximo episódio. Pessoal, agora a gente tem uma novidade. Quem não ouviu o nosso primeiro episódio, você deve estar ouvindo a gente no Spotify. Então, mas agora a gente tem uma novidade. Você pode ver a gente pode nos assistir enquanto a gente tá conversando aqui no YouTube, no nosso canal, Be Reader, vai estar na descrição do episódio ali o nosso link. Você pode nos ver também, se você não quer só nos escutar. E então é isso, guys. See you next week. Bye, Fê. See you next week.
Bye bye. See you.
Bye,
Take care,
bye.
guys.
This has been the Bilingual Coffee Podcast. We can't wait to have another Bilingual Coffee next week and have you here with us.
Se você gostou desse episódio, segue a gente aqui e compartilhe esse episódio com um amigo. Nos ajude a espalhar nosso amor pelo bilinguismo e pela criação bilíngue. Thanks for listening!